The fifth hearing this week of more than 90 in a trial to impeach the Philippine Vice President Sara Duterte faces 4 charges, including that of misusing public funds and threatening to assassinate the president. The session today seeing Ms. Duterte's defense team cross-examine a witness for the prosecution, an official from the National Bureau of Investigation who has offered testimony on the nature of threats made by the vice president in 2024. Senator warnings of protracted proceedings before then can be any credible verdict. But suggestions also that this is one trial for which the verdict could matter less than what could emerge as part of the legal battle. And we're joined in the studio by Professor Aries Arugay. He's a visiting senior fellow and coordinator of Philippine Studies Programme of the ISEAS Yusof Ishak Institute right here in Singapore. Thanks for joining us, Professor Arugay. I was going to start with the 4 articles of impeachment, but more important news, the trial today adjourning before 8 p.m. Singapore time, and the dropping of one witness. Who might that be?
Yeah. The prosecution was supposed to present the Chief of Staff of Vice President Sara Duterte, Attorney Zuleika Lopez, and she is supposed to be considered a hostile witness for the prosecution because she remains loyal and continues to work for the Vice President. The wisdom of the prosecution is that it is redundant to present her because the objective of the prosecution is just to show that the video wherein the Vice President made grave threats against the President, the First Lady, and the former Speaker are authentic and true. So the prosecution thought that the previous witness has already proven that, and therefore it would be redundant to present Ms. Lopez.
All right. The focus so far, so we're day 5, right, because we only have 3 hearings in a week. So last week, 3, yesterday 1 hearing, today another hearing, tomorrow another hearing, and then the next week. Right. So far, there are 4 articles of impeachment, but the focus, as far as you can see, has been more on just the 1 article.
Yes. So it seems like the strategy of the prosecution, as represented by members of the House of Representatives, is to present the threat made by the Vice President that she has already spoken to a supposed hitman, just in case something happens to her, to kill the President, the First Lady, and the former Speaker. The strategy is that this seems to be the most palpable of the 4 charges because the video is very public, it's been shown, and I think it's been seen by every Filipino. And it also shows the demeanor of the Vice President because the video shows a lot of cursing, a lot of violent language, and the anger shown by the Vice President, which doesn't seem to be very becoming of a public official or someone who wanted to be president by 2028.
We've had the Vice President deliver a statement today saying she did not see that any factual basis had been established. But if the fact is this video, we've had at least 7 different versions of exactly the same delivery on 7 different clips. That is not contested. So what is the prosecution contesting with the defense?
Well, the Vice President has made every effort to say that she did not make any threat, despite the obvious pronouncements that she made on the video. So therefore, this is still part, I think, of that narrative that while the video exists, that there's constant deniability on the part of the Vice President that she did not intend to kill the President, and therefore the threat are merely words. But that is up, for example, to the prosecution to prove that this is threatening, and the threat will directly benefit the President. Because after all, impeachment is not necessarily about criminal liability. It's about whether an impeachable official, this Vice President, should deserve the office that she was voted into, or whether she should continue to be holding elective office just in case she runs after her term.
So there's a broader point of can the prosecution prove that this behavior in these clips is becoming of someone so high in office in the Philippines? What would they need to show?
Well, yeah, that's right, because impeachment is not purely a legal process. It is a political process. And this is why this is televised. Every Filipino, I think millions are watching this every day. because what the House and what the prosecution wanted is that this is a process for transparency and accountability. And therefore, if the Vice President was able to really explain her behavior, as well as her use of confidential funds, the other charges, then we wouldn't have this trial. But it came to a point that impeachment must be required for her to be compelled to present her case. And this is why we're here right now.
So there are three other articles. The others involve misuse of public funds, unexplained private wealth. For you, these articles, in fact, are more damning.
Well, yes, because while they're not as visceral or as obvious as the grave threat, this has something to do with corruption, which strikes a very sensitive chord to a lot of Filipinos at the moment. And corruption seemed to be sweeping not only the accusations against the Vice President, but government at large. So I think we will see, and it will get more interesting over the days of this historic impeachment trial.
But corruption arguably might be a harder card for the current president to play against his vice president.
I think that is correct. Given the polarized nature of Philippine politics, corruption is a stain that is not only monopolized by one political dynasty or one political faction. So while the corruption allegations against Sara Duterte are being processed through this impeachment, it behooves the current government to also do its part to investigate, for example, the lingering corruption scandal on flood control projects, as well as other infrastructure projects, to show that corruption is not being, or the investigations against corruption, it's not being weaponized against the Vice President just because she has severed her ties with the current president.
So it is an issue that of the 24 senators judging this trial, 3 of them are not there, 2 incarcerated related to corruption, and 1 on the run from the ICC.
Indeed. We have never experienced this in the 2 previous impeachment trials in our history, that you have a Senate wherein certain senators are now detained for corruption allegations or for certain other offenses, and 1 with a standing warrant of arrest from the International Criminal Court. It makes it very complicated because you need 2/3 of the 24, which means 16 votes. And with 3 senators who cannot attend the trial, that makes it more difficult to reach the magic number, which is 16 for conviction.
All right. We will be seeing whether those senators vote based on the public opinion or perhaps for their own vested interest. Thanks so much for joining us, Professor Aries Arugay, visiting senior fellow and co-on the Philippine Studies Programme of the ISEAS Yusof Ishak Institute. Thanks for coming this evening. Thank you.